Chief mocked the car washer, calling him an uneducated idiot. The washer quit. And 7 years later, the boss comes to the bank for a loan for his sick daughter's operation. The man walked into the car dealership as usual, shoulders squared, a confident stride across the shiny floors, savoring the scent of new cars. People always viewed him as successful and wealthy. He was indeed such, presenting to the world only the mask of a proud, self-assured person who had achieved everything one could dream of. His dealership was the most prestigious in town, frequented by affluent clients seeking expensive cars. He could do it all. Get a rare model? Easily. Customize a car with a unique color? No problem. Orizio could fulfill any request. The only requirement was that the buyer had the money, everything else was secondary. He knew his employees didn't like him much. He understood they saw him as a cruel and arrogant boss. To some extent, he was, but he knew that his life, though seemingly beautiful and carefree, wasn't as bright as it seemed. There was a time when he could boast not only success and wealth, but also a beautiful wife. Selina was his muse, his inspiration, his pillar, and the love of his life, the mother of their charming daughter, Eve. However, he lost Selina in a foolish yet cruel accident. Orizio remembered that day as if it were yesterday. They were celebrating their 5th wedding anniversary. They had left their daughter with Selina's mother, Gabriella. After a long walk and a pleasant evening at the city's most expensive restaurant, Selina volunteered to drive their car. A storm caught them midway, turning the road into a slippery surface in an instant. If Orizio hadn't distracted his wife, caressing her thigh, she might have handled the car. One moment she laughed at his caresses, the next they were flying off the road, tumbling and crashing the car through the vegetation on the slope. Orizio survived, bruised and scratched. Selina did not. Since then, he had been alone with his daughter. Gabriella, Selina's mother, didn't abandon the widower. She took on the upbringing of her granddaughter, allowing Orizio to work for the benefit of their small family. But after his wife's death, he hardened, became cynical, distracted only by indulging his daughter with any whim or even the most expensive gifts, reminding him so much of his wife. He became tougher in business, strict with his employees. Perhaps it was because of his wife's death that he lost the ability to enjoy life and began to perceive the world through the lens of loss. It became incredibly difficult to surprise him, and he stopped considering how his actions or words might harm others. Slacking off again, "You damn lazy bum," barked Orizio as he passed by one of his employees. This young man was just a simple car washer, cleaning and polishing floors to a shine, buffing cars, ensuring all displayed vehicles were spotless for visitors. His stern, albeit youthful, face always irked Orizio. The man couldn't even recall the washer's name. What difference did it make? A washer was a washer. He didn't care what they were called. He was just another rank-and-file employee, often changing nearly every month. Today one, tomorrow another, the day after a new one. So why bother remembering names? His indifference was reinforced by the prestige of the car dealership. There were always long queues of applicants for various positions. He had seen so many resumes, and would see even more. "Don't look at me, idiot. Look here." Orizio marched up to the washer and jabbed a finger at the hood of an incredibly expensive car, leaving smudges on the freshly polished surface. "You missed the spot. Fix it quick. First customers will be here soon." The washer said nothing, glowering at the owner as he dutifully wiped away the marks left by his boss. Orizio headed to his office, feeling irritated. Every time he saw this washer, his teeth ground with hatred. This anger arose spontaneously, without any particular reason, but Orizio couldn't help but find fault with this young man. The washer seemed diligent and hardworking. All cars in the showroom were always polished to a mirror shine. The floors were immaculate as if in an operating room. He always arrived on time, never late, and left promptly after work. One might wonder, why pick on such a perfect employee? But it was precisely the washer's flawless work that irked Orizio. The pampered dealership owner devised ways to nitpick at this young man. It became a strange, daily amusement for him. He found non-existent spots and streaks where there were none, using it as an excuse to lash out at the young worker. Every day, he insulted the washer again and again, as if it were the only thing that allowed Orizio to smile. He comforted himself with the thought that he had the right to insult anyone beneath his social status, and he considered most people around him to be such. After all, he held 3 advanced degrees, not just from anywhere, but from the world's top universities. And therefore, he despised anyone with diplomas from local colleges, such as the washer working in his dealership. In Orizio's opinion, this young man was not worthy of any different treatment. This day proceeded routinely in every sense and passed swiftly, papers demanding his attention, incredibly tasty coffee, his personal assistant flirting with him again without evoking even a hint of reaction from Orizio. The man quickly grew tired and headed away. His remaining work could be handled by his employees, including those closing the car dealership for the night. Passing by the car washer, Orizio once again felt irritation rising within him. "You idiot, who taught you to hold a rag?" Orizio barked. "How were you even hired here, you clueless head? What is this? I'm asking you, what is this? Quickly mop the floors and don't you dare slack off. Get to work, I say. And don't you dare leave until everything's fixed." The washer remained silent as usual, glowering at the car dealership owner, and picked up the mop that had just been set aside after finishing mopping the floors. If not for the boss, who had walked across the still damp floor in dirty shoes, everything would have been fine. Orizio walked away, not even considering that his employee had been contemplating quitting for more than a day. He no longer had the strength to endure the constant attacks. Even the most patient and restrained person could have long ago snapped at this arrogant and uncompromising boss. The washer, Hector, ground his teeth as he scrubbed away the dealership owner's footprints, knowing it was time to bid farewell to this job. He had worked so long and steadfastly at this place, outlasting most other employees, that to everyone else he seemed the only constant worker besides Orizio at the prestigious car dealership. The next day, it all repeated once more. Orizio arrived at work smiling and content until he saw Hector. The young man diligently wiped off another streak on the windshield of a newly installed car in the showroom, preparing it for visitors. The brand new business class model gleamed under the lights, but Orizio grimaced at the sight of Hector meticulously wiping away invisible marks from the car. The dealership owner swiftly approached Hector. "How many times do I have to teach you to do your job?" Orizio shouted at him. "Do you need to wave a rag around a lot? Enough slacking off, you idiot. Let's go. Polish it. And do it thoroughly this time, so there won't be any more of these streaks." The man ran his fingers over the car, leaving prints on the freshly polished surface. Hector, as always, stayed silent, watching him go with a glare. Orizio entered his office and slumped into his chair, getting down to business. His mood improved slightly, reprimanding the car washer once again made him feel important. Less than an hour passed before Hector walked into his office. "And what are you doing?" Orizio snapped at the young man. "Get back to the showroom quickly and mop the floors. I can see from here that they're all filthy." The washer silently placed a document on the boss's desk and headed out without uttering a word. Frowning, the car dealership owner picked up the paper and irritably looked at it. It turned out to be a filled-out resignation form. "You've decided to quit?" Orizio laughed. "Who needs you? You'll come crawling back to me begging for your job again. You've been an idiot and you still are. You can't even properly wave a rag and wipe off stains." Insults continued to fly at Hector's back as he quietly gathered his things and left the car dealership where he had faithfully worked for so many years, putting in his utmost effort and keeping everything in pristine condition. Orizio laughed about it for the rest of the day. By the next day, everyone had forgotten they ever had a diligent worker who quietly did his job and endured the boss's attacks. For the car dealership owner, it seemed like everything had settled down. There was nothing else to distract or irritate him. Though, of course, the self-satisfied man still found fault with other employees, but he shouted much less now that the quietest lad in the showroom was no longer working there. But life is never that simple. One day, Orizio's daughter, Eva, returned from a long overseas trip where she had celebrated combined festivities with some of her friends. Orizio knew it was someone's birthday and a close friend of his daughter's had gotten engaged. Though Eva was a student, at that moment she was without duties, which was supposed to start only in a month. And Orizio easily let his daughter go on a long vacation. Everything was as usual. The girl boasted about her rest, shared impressions and photos, talked about how well she had spent her time and what new dishes she had managed to try on her trip. Only day passed, and Eva seemed to be fading away before our eyes. First, an incredible weakness and dizziness appeared. Then Eva suddenly lost her appetite, and her stomach twisted from any food, even the lightest. "Don't worry so much, Orizio," reassured businessman Gabriella. "Granddaughter just returned from another country, probably caught a cold, that's all." Orizio didn't intervene, trusting the more experienced woman in terms of child rearing. After all, she loved her granddaughter and wouldn't wish her harm. "She's been eating fruits and vegetables for almost a month, don't worry," Gabriella lamented the next day, once again clearing away Eva's untouched dinner portion. Orizio was grateful Gabriella lived with them, watching over Eva, as he spent too much time at work. "If anything changes, let me know," Orizio replied. "Of course, son, do you think I'd keep you in the dark? Don't worry, everything will be fine soon. I'll make soup, and you'll see, Eva will recover." But time passed, and Gabriella found more excuses: stress from starting school, climate change, magnetic storms. But once, when they were preparing to dine together, Orizio saw his daughter stagger towards the table. "Dad." Eva sounded very weak and couldn't say more. She collapsed to the floor. Orizio and Gabriella rushed to her, but she seemed so pale and unresponsive to their pleas to wake up that Orizio picked her up and rushed to the car. The trip to the hospital didn't take long. There, in the emergency room, an endless whirlwind of tests, results, and doctors' examinations began. "Don't worry." Orizio tried to cheer up Gabriella, equally worried about their granddaughter. "Maybe it's just a hormonal imbalance, and they'll give her some pills, and that's it." But it wasn't that simple. Orizio spared no expense and pressured the doctors to use every available means to get one single answer. Distraught, Orizio nearly fainted upon hearing his daughter's final diagnosis. Without Gabriella, he might have been in shock for a long time. A rare disease requiring extensive medical intervention could be fatal for the girl. Orizio's life turned upside down. His usual confidence and sense of authority were gone. He became gloomy, lost in thoughts and worries. At work, he snapped and seemed more cruel than ever before. The employees of the car dealership began to avoid him, just to avoid getting in his way. If before they feared his anger, now they were afraid of him because the man could fire anyone without any reason. The dealership staff speculated about what had happened to their boss, but rumors were flying until one gossipmonger revealed the true reason behind Orizio's intensified cruelty. "Did you hear?" Local gossip Lavrentia chirped during lunch break with her colleagues. "His daughter got sick. She's in the hospital right now." "Seriously? Is that why he's like this?" responded Lorenzo, a top car sales leader. "Well, you think? He's usually strict enough, but not this nervous. My cousin told me about it. She's a nurse at the hospital. His daughter, Eva, got admitted with some illness. They say it's serious and requires long-term treatment. The diagnosis is bleak." "Poor girl," sighed another woman who worked in accounting. "Not only does she have a father with such a bad temper, now this illness." "Oh, who cares about them?" scoffed the car salesman, sipping his strong coffee. "They're swimming in money like it's nothing. Orizio will pay for the treatment, and everything will be back to normal. You'll see." No one dared to speak directly to Orizio, enduring his outbursts and attributing it all to his concern for his only daughter. Meanwhile, Orizio tried to carry on, balancing visits to his hospitalized daughter with work. Despite his efforts, over time, the business began to decline gradually. He started giving up, once he had enough physical and mental strength to be successful in his business, but now the care of his daughter took precedence, and Orizio gradually withdrew from managing the dealership. He delegated many responsibilities to others, without considering whether they were ready for the extra load. These decisions led to new problems arising. Perhaps he could have managed it all, but life threw him another curveball. An anonymous tip-off to the tax authorities resulted in the dealership being closed for a thorough inspection. As it turned out, during his daughter's illness, Orizio completely neglected his business and the employees responsible for things like taxes and other payments. The burden shifted onto other employees, who couldn't keep up with the mounting paperwork. This blow to the dealership led to Orizio's accounts being frozen, and almost all of his savings were used to settle the debts uncovered during the inspection. But the man wasn't thinking about any of this. His main concern was Eva. His daughter urgently needed surgery. If up until this point Orizio could easily find the necessary funds for something like this, now he felt uneasy. The car dealership was barely staying afloat, and the exorbitant sum required for the surgery seemed incredible and unattainable. On another evening, sitting at the dinner table, the man struggled to eat the meal prepared by Gabriella. Eva's grandmother always found the strength not only to support her granddaughter by visiting her in the hospital, but also to support her father, who was doing his utmost to fix everything but clearly was beginning to despair. Orizio, don't lose hope. The Lord is testing you, but it's not a reason to give up. Eva needs us. Gabriella urged him, equally concerned for her granddaughter as Orizio himself. The Lord is testing me enough. Orizio snapped, feeling drained. Selena died, leaving me alone with Eva, and now Eva is facing death from some damn illness. And all these problems with the tax authorities. If the dealership could operate like before, there would be money for treatment. Gabriella understood his frustration and didn't take offense at his tone. Don't lose hope. Selena is watching over us from heaven. She will surely watch over Eva and won't let her perish. I remember how much she loved both of you. She won't let Eva suffer for long. Believe in her. Believe. Orizio would have been glad to believe in God and the idea that Eva's mother was watching over them from heaven, and in the hope that everything would work out. But life seemed so overshadowed by what was happening that he no longer knew what to believe in. When visiting Eva in the hospital, he still tried to appear cheerful and confident, but seeing his daughter pale and weak, Orizio couldn't help but feel despair in his heart. The girl seemed to be wasting away before his eyes, turning into a frail skeleton. With all the problems that had arisen, Orizio knew he had no choice but to turn to the bank for a loan. There was no other way he could accumulate the necessary amount for the surgery to help his beloved daughter. Her health was more important to him than anything else. Neither the business, nor the mansion, nor the cars, most of which he had sold to pay the hospital bills, none of it evoked the same sense of attachment as before. Only Eva, so much like her mother, was the most important person in his life. We'll get through this, Orizio. Everything will be fine. Gabriella continued to reassure him. The man knew how deeply she worried for her granddaughter and was grateful for her support during this difficult period in their lives. If it weren't for her, Orizio might have despaired so much that he wouldn't have been able to endure these circumstances. I hope so, Orizio replied to Gabriella. Tomorrow, I'm going to the bank to apply for a loan, pray that they approve it. I won't be able to handle it if they refuse. I'll pray. And I'll pray for Eva too. Nodded Gabriella. And for you, I'll pray. The Lord sees how hard you're trying. Orizio didn't respond, grimly preparing everything for his visit to the bank. As he packed documents into his briefcase, he knew he would have to pledge the remaining assets just to get his request considered, but he wasn't as confident of a positive outcome as Gabriella was. The man understood that the bank was a soulless machine focused solely on profit. What profit could he offer? The next morning, at the bank, Orizio almost winced at the chaos inside. He had forgotten what it was like to be among ordinary people asking for a loan. It was a hot day, and the cramped bank was incredibly stuffy due to the number of people crammed inside for their own purposes. Orizio, already sullen and nervous, grew even darker with each passing moment. Clients absorbed in their problems, employees smiling sweetly while eager to earn more money for the bank. Orizio couldn't help but think of how many false promises were made just to convince poor souls who spent their entire lives working various jobs to accept terms and offers that were clearly disadvantageous to them. Glancing around at the busy people, Orizio suddenly felt a strange sense of tension. Something wasn't right. He began to scrutinize the people, and finally, he saw a face that was painfully familiar. Of all the people not to see here, Orizio muttered. As much as he had despised this person before, finding the slightest reason to insult the car washer, now he had no time for that at all. During the time he had not been working for Orizio, the young man seemed to have become much better. Dark circles under his eyes had disappeared, his grim look, pallor, and slight stoop were gone. That's why Orizio didn't recognize him at first. Now the former car washer looked taller, with shoulders proudly straightened, a tan and well-rested face, and a sparkle in his brown eyes. In addition, he had become fit and had a new haircut, making him look barely older than Orizio's daughter. The car dealership owner didn't want to meet with him at all, but the young man approached him on his own. Not the best day to be at the bank, huh? Hector joined his former boss. Not the word for it, Orizio replied darkly. I hope everything's okay with you. You don't seem quite yourself. Orizio grimaced. Nothing is okay. The man struggled to recall the name of his former employee. Hector, I don't have time for you. The young man frowned. Don't despair. Everything can be overcome. Difficulties build character and give us the opportunity to show our best selves. What do you know about such things? Orizio retorted. Quite a bit. I worked for you for so many years, endured your attacks, but you have no idea how much they helped me by subjecting me to that stress. During my time at your dealership, I learned a lot and saved up enough money to start my own business. And what did you manage to start? Orizio could barely muster anything to say to the young man in response to such a declaration. My own car wash service. At first, it was tough washing cars alone. I did what I could, but patience and hard work paid off, and I gradually began to expand. I eventually hired employees, rented an office, and stocked up on everything needed. Hector shook his head. So, everything can be overcome, everything can be fixed. The key is to not lose hope and not give up. And what are you doing here then? Orizio asked. I've decided to expand even further. I'm thinking of opening a network of high-quality car washes. And believe me, the quality we offer is incredibly high. You taught me to work meticulously and with quality. For that, I'm immensely grateful to you. So, you're here to take out a loan to expand your car wash. Orizio sighed. I'm happy for you. He didn't know what else to say to Hector. The young man had become more cheerful and composed, clearly satisfied with the positive change in his life. Orizio sadly thought about his sick daughter. Would he ever see her smile again? Would they approve the loan for her operation? Would his little girl ever recover? And what brings you to the bank? Hector asked cautiously. Is it something to do with the dealership? Not just that. The dealership is barely staying afloat, that's true, but that's not why I'm here. What happened? A lot has happened, Hector. I owe taxes, which wiped out all my savings. But that's not important. There are more serious matters in life. More cruel problems. Oh? Hector was surprised by Orizio's words, accustomed to hearing something completely different from him. Were the once important matters of money and the car dealership suddenly not so important to the man? Something must have strongly influenced him, prompting him to change priorities in life. I don't even know if they'll approve my loan, Orizio continued. I'm ready to put up everything I have left. And I really need the money. The situation is too dire to get through this without funds. Why do you need the money? Hector inquired. My daughter. The car dealership owner sighed heavily. My Eva, she's in the hospital. Hector was surprised. It was the first time he had learned that Orizio had a daughter. What happened? The young man asked. At first, we thought it was nothing. Just a cold, a change in climate after her long vacation abroad. Orizio's voice trembled. We thought it would pass. Then she collapsed, and we rushed her to the hospital. Since that night, she's been lying there. The doctors ran so many tests that all my remaining funds went to consultations with the best specialists. We found out what's wrong, but now we need money for surgery. Without it, Eva won't survive. And I've run out of money. I've spent it all. That's why I'm here. Hector sat silently beside him, trying to think of something to say to Orizio, but he didn't even manage to open his mouth. The speaker crackled to life, announcing that it was his turn, and he should approach a specific counter. Everything will be all right. Hector patted his former boss on the shoulder, rising from the couch where they had been sitting and talking. Orizio didn't respond, lost in his thoughts. He took out a photograph from his breast pocket and looked at the image taken shortly before his wife's death. He looked at Selena's happy face, at his laughing, still very young daughter sitting on his shoulders, and his own joyful face. Tears welled up in his eyes, and Orizio irritably wiped them away. He sat there, remembering that day, his heart aching with pain. The man didn't know how much time had passed when suddenly someone stopped in front of him. He looked up and saw Hector extending a nondescript package to his former boss. The ex-car washer's face was calm, but in his eyes, Orizio saw something akin to genuine sympathy. A surge of irritation washed over Orizio immediately, and his face flushed with anger and indignation. Did he, a prominent businessman who was not an insignificant figure in the capital, need help from some washed-up car washer? But the young man didn't say anything, shrugged his shoulders, and placed the package next to Orizio before walking away. The man wanted to rush after him, but hesitated, his hands shaking with indignation, nearly dropping the package left by Hector. By the time he dashed out onto the sun-drenched street, the car washer and any trace of him had vanished. Oh, you empty-headed fool, the businessman cursed himself. What a complete idiot you are, Hector. Unable to locate his former employee, Orizio accepted his defeat and returned to the bank, postponing resolution of this matter for later. However, the money left by Hector came in handy. Ultimately, the bank denied the businessman's loan request, dissatisfied with the collateral he offered. Orizio was infuriated by the insincere, sympathetic smiles of the bank staff, but he couldn't do anything about it. He knew that causing a scene wouldn't help Eva. Forced to use the funds provided by the car washer, Orizio paid for his daughter's surgery, and finally, she began to recover. The following year passed in a haze. Orizio rejoiced as Eva gradually regained her health. Despite a difficult post-operative period and some related issues with medications, nothing seemed as challenging as the illness that had hospitalized her. Each new day brought new problems, but they faced them with hope. After all, the worst was behind them. The man delighted in seeing his daughter smile again, her pale face adorned with a healthy glow, and her eyes shining once more. Witnessing positive changes in his daughter, Orizio couldn't help but feel grateful towards Hector. He berated himself for his past treatment of the former car washer, who had silently endured his unfair attacks while working at his dealership. Ashamed of this, Orizio promised himself to change and not repeat such mistakes, which could affect not only his dealership but himself as well. After all, Hector had no obligation to help a former boss who had mistreated him for years. Orizio was already rejoicing in the valuable lesson Hector had taught him, promising to someday repay the young man with similar kindness. For now, however, life was improving for him. Month after month, Eva grew stronger, no longer reliant on pills and medicines. Visits to the doctors became less frequent, and those visits brought smiles, confirming that Eva was finally completely healthy. Forced to take a leave of absence from her studies during her illness, Eva returned to university and successfully completed her education. Orizio was proud of his daughter. She not only stayed strong during her illness, but also endured everything that followed the surgery. Moreover, she managed to graduate as one of the top students in her class. On that day, they were heading to the graduation ceremony, and Eva laughed, rejoicing in her achievements and anticipating the future prospects ahead of her. She chatted about her dreams, and Orizio couldn't help but delight in his daughter, fully understanding that everything would be all right now. "Oh, Dad." Eva clapped her hands together. "We were supposed to wash the car before the ceremony." "That's right." Orizio glanced at his wristwatch and realized they had plenty of time, as they had left much earlier than necessary. He turned into a car wash adorned with a beautiful sign, and several employees immediately took their car. Orizio and Eva headed to the office to pay for the services and wait for their car to be ready. Suddenly, Orizio heard a painfully familiar voice and turned sharply, seeing a handsome, tall young man holding a wooden tablet with a stack of papers on it. Without a doubt, it was Hector. Orizio felt a surge of emotions and didn't know whether to shout, rejoice, or reprimand the man for giving him the money for his daughter's surgery. "Dad?" Eva nudged her father's elbow. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "That's exactly," her father murmured. Orizio swallowed hard, trying to gather his thoughts, and saw Hector finishing a conversation with his employees and turning towards them. Upon seeing his former boss, the young man smiled, but when Eva stepped out from behind the businessman's back, Hector's smile widened even more. On unsteady legs, Orizio approached the young businessman and without a moment's hesitation, enveloped him in a tight embrace. "Hector, if you only knew how much you've helped me," Orizio said with tears in his eyes, not letting go of the young man. "I am so grateful to you. I owe you so much." "Oh, come on, it was nothing." Hector tried to brush it off. Finally stepping back, Orizio shook his head. "It was far from nothing. You saved my daughter's life. My Eva." "Hi." The girl smiled, not understanding why her father was so agitated upon seeing the car wash owner. "I'm Eva." "Hector," the young man shook the offered hand. "Nice to meet you." "Oh. So you're the guardian angel my dad was telling me about?" Hector chuckled awkwardly, scratching the back of his head and glancing at Orizio, who seemed incredibly happy to see him. "Oh, come on, guardian angel." Hector waved it off. "I just helped out where I could." "Don't downplay your contributions, Hector." Orizio nodded at the young man. "You saved us, even though you didn't have to. Without a doubt, you were sent by God himself. I couldn't just walk away and leave you in trouble, Orizio. My mother raised me to be a good and compassionate person. She always said we should help people in need. And although we had tense relations in the past, if it weren't for your lessons, I would never have started my own business." "Tense relations?" Eva looked at her father, crossing her arms over her chest and frowning. "Dad, you never told me about this." Orizio awkwardly scratched his head. "Well, Hector used to work at my car dealership," he said. "He was a car washer and cleaned the halls. Forgive me, Hector. I treated you unfairly." Hector shook his head with a smile. "Oh, that's all in the past, Orizio. Let's forget about it. If it weren't for how you guided me, I wouldn't have had the patience and perseverance to overcome all the challenges of starting my own business. Your attitude instilled patience and resilience in me, which is incredibly important when facing various problems at the beginning of the journey. My dad was always strict." Eva sighed. "But I had no idea what was really going on." "It's all in the past, Miss Eva," Hector waved it off. "It doesn't matter now. The main thing is that you are alive and well, and the rest doesn't matter." The young man became even more flustered when he saw the girl smile. Never before had he felt so thrown off balance. It was as if lightning had struck him, shaking him so much that he suddenly lost all his confidence. It wasn't just the beauty of the girl that struck him, but the lively eyes filled with life, her thirst for living and finding joy in each day after everything she had been through. This sincere desire to see beauty in the world after trials was something not everyone possessed, and that's what attracted Hector the most. "Dad, you do agree we can't let his kindness go unrewarded, right?" Eva nudged her father's side. Orizio looked at his daughter. "And what do you suggest?" The girl laughed. "Why don't we invite him to dinner?" Her father smiled. "Why not? Great idea. Hector, you mustn't refuse our invitation." The young man truly couldn't resist Eva's charming smile. That same evening, he listened spellbound as she enthusiastically talked about her dreams, not only to work in her chosen field, but also to help people, just as Hector had done without hesitation when he helped her father. Hector couldn't take his eyes off her, and Orizio smiled, understanding that these two had found common ground, not just because the young man had helped pay for the girl's operation when it was so desperately needed. In the passionate gaze of the former car washer, Orizio saw admiration and budding love. In some ways, he reminded the man of himself when he met Selena many years ago. From that day, Orizio and Eva's lives took a turn for the better. Hector and Eva began dating, and Orizio couldn't have been happier. He couldn't have dreamed of a more worthy son-in-law. The man became more cheerful and confident, as if he had never experienced despair when everything in life went awry. Gradually, he restored his auto dealership to its former glory, paid off all his debts, and even expanded, opening new showrooms in neighboring cities. He kept a close eye on his business, no longer allowing himself to miss reports or tax payments, to avoid a situation that nearly closed down his creation forever. His collaboration with Hector also played its part, and together they expanded their business, celebrating each other's successes. Orizio stopped being as harsh at work, and employees began to stay longer in his company. Now there were no resignations due to Orizio's bad temper, which used to provoke outbursts against his employees. Meanwhile, Eva was glad to see her father becoming more joyful and gentle, more often revealing his better side. Whereas before he grumbled at his employees, who constantly slacked off and annoyed him, now she heard praise and pride for his team. "Oh, Dad," Eva said one day, smiling. "I'm so glad you've changed like this. If it weren't for you, my daughter, and Hector, I would have remained a gloomy and grumpy tyrant." Orizio hugged his daughter. "You both managed to make me change, and I am immensely grateful for that. Mom would be proud of you, Dad." Eva kissed her father on the cheek. "I'm sure she's looking down on us from heaven and smiling." "I have no doubt," replied the man. "Will Hector join us for dinner, dear?" Gabriella asked, preparing once again to cook something from her famous dishes that everyone loved. "Of course." Eva's face lit up with a smile. Orizio was glad that Hector had remained in their lives. Every time the young man came over, he couldn't help but be happy that his daughter had found such a man. However, this evening was different. Hector, as always, didn't come empty-handed, and dinner itself didn't proceed as usual. At one point, Hector glanced at Eva, smiling, and they both blushed. Orizio already suspected that the two had some good news to announce, but he wasn't prepared for what he would hear next. "Orizio, Gabriella." Hector's smile widened. "We have news for you." Eva seemed eager to speak, but Hector gently squeezed her hand, and she silently waited for her moment. "But first, Orizio, I would like to formally ask for your daughter's hand." Hector saw the smile light up the face of his former boss and knew his answer. Orizio jumped up and rushed to the young man, embracing him tightly. "My God! Yes! Yes, 1,000 times yes!" Orizio exclaimed, holding him in his arms. "I couldn't dream of a better son-in-law." Eva laughed, raising her hand, on the ring finger of which shone a beautiful engagement ring. Orizio was immensely moved by this news. They had a magnificent wedding. Orizio spared no expense, paying for everything, including a luxurious honeymoon on the islands. During the celebration, Orizio gave a speech that brought tears to everyone's eyes. "Today, we celebrate the union of my dear beautiful daughter, Eva, and the most wonderful young man with the purest soul, who is not only worthy of her, but also helped me become a better person. I couldn't dream of a better son-in-law. I thank God for sending me not only trials, but also this angel in the flesh, who saved both me and my beloved daughter. This wonderful man showed me what it means to be kind and compassionate towards others' sorrows. If it weren't for him, I might have despaired, but his helping hand came just in time. Thank you, Hector, for everything you've done and for loving my daughter. The celebration was lavish and lively. Orizio was even prouder of his daughter than ever before, rejoicing that she had found love in the person who had literally saved her life. He no longer feared the future, knowing now that they could overcome any trials that might arise. Without a doubt, Hector and Eva were a couple blessed by angels and God in heaven. It couldn't have been otherwise.